Hey guys, it's Bella. Welcome back to another Mystery Monday, the first one of the year. I hope you guys had an amazing holiday period. I hope that your year is off to an amazing start. To kick off the new year, these videos are actually available on Spotify now. Can you believe it? I feel like it has been a really long time coming that I have been meaning to put these on Spotify, but it's there now. So you can now go and watch these on Spotify because they have the video format, or you can just, switch that off and turn me to audio if that's what you feel like doing. I get it. No hard feelings. But it's really fun because now we can hang out no matter what you're doing. If you're in the car, I can be there too. If you're on a walk, I can be there too. If you're on a run, I can be there too. And if you're doing that as well, if you are on a run or if you are in the gym, then I am really jealous of you. I really am. I wish that could be me, but I am just not that kind of girl. Not even the new year can get me on a runner in the gym. Moral of the story though, we're on Spotify now. So I'm really excited about that. I'm excited to be able to hang out with you guys wherever you are and just chat. It's been a long time coming, so hopefully I will see you guys there. And if you're new here, hi, welcome. We talk about true crime cases on Mondays here on this channel. So if that's something that you're interested in, then please come and join us, come hang out. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. Before we do get into today's case, I just quickly want to thank our sponsor, MyHeritage. They are the #1 global service for family heritage research as well as DNA testing with over 90 million users. And they're also home to 28 billion easily searchable history records. So it makes building your family tree really easy. And it's also so much fun just learning about yourself, about your family, about your ancestry and where you came from. I've been building my family tree on MyHeritage and it's been such an interesting process for me because my family is from all over, Costa Rica and Italy. My dad's first language was actually Spanish. He didn't learn English until he was 6 years old. And going back even further than my grandparents, I have family from Serbia, Spain, Wales, and Ireland. I called my parents to have them help me input some of the information into the family tree, and it was just such a nice way to connect with them and connect with my family. My dad also told me about his uncle actually, who has a bunch of old photos from some of our ancestors even dating back to the 1800s. And using MyHeritage's AI tools, I was able to colorize a photo my mum found of my dieta, which is so special to us because he passed away in 2014 and was a really big part of our lives. You can repair, enhance, colorize, and even animate historical photos, which is really special. They also have powerful tools that can help you to research family history and help grow your family tree. So you might even discover relatives you didn't know you had, discover new things about your ancestry and your origins. I really recommend it because personally I had an amazing time putting together my family tree, and it was such a nice way to connect with my family and learn more about myself and my family. They also have a 14-day free trial for the MyHeritage Complete Plan. So I'll put a little QR code on the screen where you can access that, and I'll also put a link in the description box down below for you. So make sure that you check that out, and let's go ahead and get into today's case. So today we're going to be talking about the case of Daniel Morcombe. If you're Australian, you've probably heard of this case. It's one of the most prolific cases that the country has ever seen. It's actually hard to describe the impact that this case had, not only in Queensland where it happened, but in the whole of Australia. It really devastated the entire nation. Daniel was 13 when he was abducted in 2003, and I was just a kid in school in Queensland. So this case was a really big deal for us. I remember it being all over the news. I remember following along in the investigation. I remember the haunting images of his parents and their pain and their strength. I remember the big, very controversial sting operation that they conducted in order to finally catch his killer. And I think these are all things that are ingrained into the memories of most Australians. It's something that most Australians will never forget. To this day, there's still an annual day for Daniel in Australia, which was started by the Daniel Morcombe Foundation, which was founded by his incredible parents, Bruce and Denise. I'll leave a link to their website down below. But each year, countless Australians participate in Day for Daniel by wearing red. There are, many primary schools across the country that have the kids come in wearing red in honor of Daniel because he was wearing a red t-shirt when he disappeared, and it's really that color has become a symbol of this case. On this day, there's also a walk for Daniel, which is a 4-kilometer walk that represents the route that Daniel was unable to complete himself. All of this is done in Daniel's memory, and it's also done to raise awareness and raise money for child safety education, and it is the biggest child safety education and awareness day in Australia. So Daniel Morcombe was born in Melbourne on the 19th of December 1989 alongside his twin brother Bradley to parents Denise and Bruce Morcombe. They also had another son who was 2 years older than the twins named Dean. In 1993, the family of 5 moved to the Sunshine Coast in Queensland after purchasing a Jim's Mowing franchise there, which if you are Australian, you know Jim's Mowing. Jim's is the biggest home franchising group in Australia. So they have Jim's Mowing, Jim's Paving, Jim's Fencing, Jim's Cleaning, Jim's Driving. Like, I think there's literally a Jim's for everything. In the year 2000, Denise and Bruce were doing really well and they purchased a 4-bedroom home in Palmwoods, which is in the Sunshine Coast hinterlands. The property was on 5 acres of land, which was perfect for their young family, and the 3 young boys each got their own bedroom. They were renovating the home together, and Bruce was a keen gardener as well, so he would take the boys out the back to help him get the garden into shape, planting trees and plants, and they planted more than 100 exotic fruit trees. They had a dam in the backyard as well, which had Australian bass, barramundi, and golden perch fish in it. So it was no surprise that the boys loved being at home. They loved being in the garden. They loved picking and eating fresh fruit straight from the tree. They loved helping their parents out. They also helped the neighbors out. They worked picking passion fruits for their neighbors for a little bit of money on occasion as well. The family also had a bunch of animals. They had chickens, ducks, they had a bull named Hugo, a cow named Millie. They had 2 cats, one named Mittens who slept with Daniel every single night, and also a rag doll named Gitana. They had a German shepherd named Chief who was Daniel's very best friend, and he was very protective over Daniel. And Daniel and his twin brother Bradley also ended up getting 2 ponies. Bruce had found them at a local nursery when he was picking up some plants for the yard, and these ponies were born just 1 day apart to the same father. So Daniel and Bradley, being twins, just really connected with these ponies. They loved visiting them, bringing them carrots, patting them, sometimes even having riding lessons. They started a tradition where they would bring the ponies peanut butter sandwiches on New Year's Day and on the ponies' birthdays, and then when the ponies were old enough, they actually took them home. So Bradley's was named Sorrento and Daniel named his Bullet. They would take them on walks around the paddock, and every second day they would ride them for half an hour. The family also ended up buying 2 more horses named Katie and Shambhala, and in 2003 Katie gave birth, so they introduced a new foal to the family as well. So it was really no surprise that Daniel loved animals. He was a bit of an animal whisperer and they loved him right back. So he had aspirations to become a vet when he was older. He was described as a shy, quiet, patient kid. He would pick flowers and collect knickknacks for his mum on his way home from school. He was a very well-behaved, helpful boy, and he had a particularly close relationship with his twin brother Bradley. But the whole family was very close. They were a very, very loving family. Every Wednesday after getting home from school and feeding the animals, Daniel and Bradley would make a spag bowl, and they would argue over who got to cut the onion or who got to cut the garlic or who got to brown the meat. Every August, their grandparents, Denise's parents, would visit, and the boys would also call them every Sunday at 7 p.m. The family of 5 loved to go on holidays together as well, particularly Hamilton Island they'd gone to on many occasions, and it's arguably one of the most beautiful places in Australia with the most beautiful beaches. So they would go there and they would go snorkeling, sailing, diving, and they just had a really great time together in each other's company. By mid-2003, Bruce and Denise's business was doing super well. They had over 50 franchisees, and it allowed them to have purchased 2 investment properties by this point. By October 2003, they decided they wanted to slow things down, and so they sold all of their mowing franchises and instead purchased the regional franchisor rights for Jim's tree removal and stump grinding in Queensland, which allowed them to sell franchises for tree surgery for the whole of Queensland, and they were able to run this from home and work from home so that they could spend more time with their sons. So on the 7th of December 2003, Daniel and his brothers woke up early so that they could go and pick passion fruit from a neighbor's yard for some money. When they finished up at 9:45 a.m., their neighbor Judith drove Daniel and his brother Bradley home, and Daniel was given his weekly pay of $90. Their brother Dean was already home as well because he had finished up a little bit earlier and rode his dirt bike home. By the time all 3 boys were home, their parents Denise and Bruce had already left for a work Christmas party that was being held in Brisbane, about an hour-and-a-half drive away from where they lived in Palmwoods. They'd asked the boys that morning if they'd wanted to come with them to the Christmas party, but they were boys, it was a Sunday, it was December, they just wanted to wake up early, pick their fruit, and then come home and relax. That afternoon, Daniel decided that he wanted to go into the Sunshine Plaza shopping centre in Maroochydore to get a haircut and also to buy Christmas gifts for his family. He begged both of his brothers to come with him, but Dean had already made plans to go to a friend's house, and Bradley just, he just didn't really feel like coming. He just wanted to have a relaxing afternoon at home. So Daniel decided to head in by himself, and he made the 20-minute or 1.3 kilometre walk from their home to the bus stop on Nambour Connection Road under the Kiel Mountain overpass. This wasn't actually an official bus stop, but the buses always stopped here for passengers anyway. They had a hail and ride policy where if someone hailed them, they had to stop and pick them up, provided it was a safe location for the bus to do so. The Morcombe boys had caught the bus from this exact location many times before, and they were all considered to be well-mannered, well-behaved, trustworthy boys, and this was also regional Queensland in 2003. It was considered to be a very safe place. Kids were often out riding their bikes or, catching buses to shopping centres by themselves. Daniel's parents had let him take the bus to the plaza from this location at least 15 times before, sometimes with his brothers, sometimes alone. The family rule, though, was that if the boys did catch the bus to the plaza, they had to be on the last bus home, which departed the plaza at 5:05 p.m. and arrived at the boys' local bus stop at 5:30 p.m. Nambour Connection Road, where Daniel was waiting, was also a major arterial road that connected to the Bruce Highway. It was also just down the road from the Big Pineapple, which is a tourist attraction on the Sunshine Coast, and so the road was very busy. It got a lot of traffic from both tourists and locals. So Daniel was waiting there for the 1:35 p.m. bus, but it had actually broken down just a few hundred meters from his stop, far enough away that he wasn't actually able to see that the bus had broken down. A replacement bus service was dispatched, but because the service was now so far behind schedule, the driver was told to run an express service straight to the Sunshine Plaza shopping centre, and another bus would be just a few minutes behind picking up all stranded passengers. The first replacement bus passed Daniel at 2:14 p.m, so Daniel had been waiting for about 45 minutes by this point. The driver drove straight past Daniel because he was running an express service, but he did try to indicate to Daniel that there was another bus just a few minutes behind. He also radioed in to the second bus to let the driver know that there was a young boy waiting underneath the overpass and to make sure that they picked him up. The driver of the bus noted that Daniel didn't seem to be in any difficulty and that there was another older man standing 7 to 8 meters behind him who he assumed to be his father. When the second bus arrived just 2 to 3 minutes later though, Daniel was gone. When Denise and Bruce arrived home from their work Christmas party at around 3:40 p.m, Bradley was the only one home. He told his parents that Dean was at a friend's house and that Daniel had gone to the plaza but wasn't home yet, which wasn't out of the ordinary because he usually wouldn't return home until the last bus. But by 4:20 p.m, Denise just had a feeling in her chest that something wasn't right. Although she knew that Daniel wasn't due to the bus stop until 5:30 p.m, she decided to drive down there to pick him up in case he decided to catch the earlier bus that would arrive at 4:30 p.m. But the bus never came, which only made Denise feel more unsettled. She decided to drive along Nambour Connection Road, which is when she saw the broken down bus being loaded onto a tow truck. She drove home very slowly, looking for Daniel along the way in case he was walking, but there was no sign of him. When she got home, she told Bruce about the broken down bus and considered that this may have thrown the bus's timetable off for the day. Knowing the family rule that the boys had to be on the last bus home arriving at 5:30, Bruce went down to the bus stop to wait for Daniel to pick him up. But the 5:30 p.m. bus came and went, and Daniel was nowhere to be seen. When Bruce drove home and told Denise this, it was at this point that they knew that something was very wrong. At 5:45 p.m, they drove to Sunshine Plaza together to look for Daniel, but being a Sunday, the plaza closed at 4 p.m. and there was no sign of their son. When they got home, they called the bus company, who weren't very helpful, but did tell them that they didn't pick up anybody matching Daniel's description that day. They decided to drive down to the depot in Nambour to see if they could give them any more information, but the depot was already closed. With no idea what to do, they decided to drive home and check their property. They lived on 5 acres of land, and so they decided to check their yard, the old sheds, the barn, the dam. They were hoping that Daniel had come home and he was just pottering around outside so nobody had seen him, that maybe he was fixing up his old motorbike that they kept in the shed, but he wasn't there. By 7:10 p.m, they decided to drive back to the Sunshine Plaza bus depot to see if Daniel had missed the bus and he was waiting there for them to pick him up, or maybe he was walking home at this point. But by the time they got to Sunshine Plaza at 7:30 p.m, it was a ghost town. It was eerily quiet and it was clear that nobody was there. It was evident to them now that something was very, very wrong, and so they decided to drive to the nearby Maroochydore police station to report Daniel missing. Sergeant Munn took their details and a description of Daniel, but told them it was too early to file a missing persons report as the unit wasn't staffed on Sundays. He did, however, put an alert out to all units on the Sunshine Coast to be on the lookout for Daniel. He told them to come back first thing in the morning to report him missing, but assured them that he would likely show up in the next few hours. By the time Denise and Bruce left the police station, it was 8:15 p.m. They drove home very slowly, looking for Daniel along the way, hoping that he'd turned up at home in the time that they were gone, but of course he hadn't. Denise's parents also called while they were out for their weekly Sunday night phone call with the boys, so they were now aware as well that Daniel was missing. Denise started calling all of Daniel's friends to see if he had wound up at anybody's house, if anyone had seen or heard from him, but nobody had. They checked their yard again, the barn, the stables, the dam. They walked around the streets surrounding their house with flashlights. They also drove back down to the bus stop where Daniel was waiting and searched that area with flashlights as well. They weren't sure what they were looking for, but they just felt like they couldn't stay at home and do nothing. And what was worse is night had well and truly fallen, and Daniel was afraid of the dark. They got back home at around 10 p.m. and it wasn't long before the phone rang. It was Sergeant Munn calling to check on them. They told him that Daniel hadn't returned. They told him about the calls to his friends, the searches they had conducted, and how concerned they were for their son's welfare, as this was completely out of character. Sergeant Munn told them that he would call them again later that night because he had now requested a crew to attend their house in a police car to get more details. The police car never showed up, but they did get another call at 11 p.m. from a senior constable telling them to sit tight and to come into the station at 8 a.m. when they opened to make a missing persons report if Daniel still hadn't returned by that time. Nobody in the Morcombe family got a wink of sleep that night, and Daniel's twin brother Bradley did something he hadn't done in years, and he came and crawled in and snuggled in between his parents in their bed. They were all sick with worry. Denise spent most of the night on the couch in the living room, staring out the living room windows. She went into Daniel's room several times, but everything was as it was the night before. By 4:30 in the morning, Bruce was checking the yard again, and by 6 a.m. they decided to make the 20-minute, 1.3-kilometer walk that Daniel made from their house to the bus stop. At this point, they're thinking that maybe there's been some kind of accident or injury, and that he was laying in a ditch somewhere, unable to get help or unable to get home. But there was no sign of Daniel anywhere. Denise and Bruce arrived at the Maroochydore police station as soon as they opened at 8 a.m. to report Daniel missing, and by 9 a.m. the police officially declared him a missing person and started their investigation. The next day, by the 9th of December, this was declared a major incident, and the first photos of Daniel began appearing in the media, and his parents appeared on camera to appeal for any information that could bring their son home. By this point, a large-scale search was underway. Friends and family searched alongside police and over 50 state emergency service volunteers on foot, while a helicopter searched overhead. Water police began searching nearby dams and rivers. A large-scale door-knock search was conducted, and police also secured and examined CCTV footage from the Sunshine Plaza shopping center, as well as CCTV footage from all service stations within a 5-kilometer radius, and CCTV from the Nambour railway station. A few days into the search, they decided to release information to the public of a fob watch that Daniel had been wearing when he disappeared, which had the inscription Dan engraved onto it. The engraving was an early birthday present from his twin brother Bradley. They also began contacting all second-hand dealers and pawnbrokers from Bundaberg to Caboolture to see if anybody had tried to sell this watch, but there was no luck. A week after the disappearance, a mannequin was placed under the Keel Mountain overpass, dressed in the same clothes Daniel had been wearing when he disappeared: a red Billabong t-shirt, navy blue cargo shorts, and Globe sneakers. This prompted witnesses to come forward saying they had seen Daniel waiting beneath the overpass on the afternoon of the 7th of December. The driver of the replacement bus confirmed that he had driven past Daniel at 2:14 p.m. as Daniel tried to flag him down, and that there was a man standing 7 to 8 meters behind him. A passenger on this replacement bus also came forward to say that she had seen both Daniel and this unknown man under the overpass as they drove past. She said that the man wasn't looking at the bus at all as it passed, rather he was staring at the young boy in front of him. She said she'd been so distressed after seeing the disappointment in the boy's face as they drove past that she demanded to know why the bus driver hadn't picked him up. The driver of the second bus that was tasked with picking up all stranded passengers confirmed that he had been told to pick up a young boy from underneath the overpass, but when he arrived 2 to 3 minutes later, nobody was there. Another witness that claimed she was driving to get on the Bruce Highway at this time said that she saw a young boy in a red shirt underneath the overpass talking to an older man. She said the boy looked disturbed but not frightened, and it seemed like the boy and the man were in some sort of confrontation. She described the man as being in his late 30s and having messy, moosey blonde hair down his neck. There were over 10 witnesses who claimed to have seen both Daniel and this unknown man under the overpass at the same time. They all described the man in a similar way: a scruffy or rough-looking man with messy, unkempt or scraggly hair and a goatee beard or partial facial hair. Several more witnesses reported seeing a late model blue sedan in the area at the time, and at least 5 witnesses claimed they saw the car parked dangerously near the overpass. Multiple other witnesses reported seeing the sedan speeding near Nambour Connection Road. There were also several other sightings of a white 4-wheel drive parked near the overpass while Daniel was waiting for the bus, as well as a report that a witness had to brake to avoid the 4-wheel drive which had been speeding toward her. Forensic examinations took place under the overpass, which concentrated on shoe impressions, tire marks, and shattered glass found there. The tire prints were compared with cars of 10 different pedophiles of interest. One witness had reported seeing the scruffy man resting his foot against a wall under the overpass while talking to Daniel, and that wall was fingerprint tested as well. Task Force Argos, which is a branch of the Queensland Police Department that investigates child exploitation and abuse, was called in to locate and speak to child sex offenders in the area. They were able to compile a list of persons of interest, but had no concrete evidence to actually make any arrests. As the search continued, on the 12th of December, a vigil was held at Daniel's school, Siena Catholic College. At the service, Denise, Bruce, Bradley, and Dean were joined by over 400 friends and supporters. The 19th of December, just 12 days after Daniel's disappearance, was his and his twin brother Bradley's 14th birthday. Every year, they would take turns opening presents and they would blow out the candles on their cake and make a wish. But this year, Bradley's only wish was for his brother to come home. It was a really hard day for him, and his parents and his grandparents decided to take him diving with the sharks at Underwater World to try and give him something special on his birthday and take his mind off things for at least a little while. A few days later, on Christmas Day, the family placed flowers and a card for Daniel under the overpass where he disappeared. The year ended with no new leads or discoveries in the case, but Daniel's memory lived on in the public. This case had such a huge community response. In January, Denise and Bruce launched the Red Ribbon campaign, which was massive. The color red really became a symbol of the case because of Daniel's red t-shirt. Denise and Bruce encouraged the public to display red ribbons on their letterboxes to symbolize that Daniel is not forgotten. As a result, ribbons began to sprout everywhere, along streets, on letterboxes, in schools, at bus stops, and shopping centers. 2,000 red ribbons were handed out at the Stella Maris Catholic Church Dream Mass. On the 2nd of February, Daniel's school, Siena Catholic College, held a Red Ribbon Day, and a stall was set up at Sunshine Coast Plaza, which sold their full stock of 500 candles and 900 letterbox ribbons to raise money for the Daniel Morcombe Fund. On the 6th of February, a Day for Daniel was held, organized by Siena Catholic College and the North Coast branch of Crime Stoppers. The day was a Golf Day fundraiser. More than 280 people teed off that day, the largest charity golf day in Sunshine Coast history. By mid-March, 20,000 posters showing Daniel's photo and the details of his disappearance were supplied to schools, shopping centres, police stations, and businesses across Australia. A second Day for Daniel was held on the 20th of April, which was announced by the Queensland Premier at the time. It was held in Queen's Park in Brisbane, where Denise and Bruce launched 1,000 red balloons into the sky. By this point, more than 4,000 calls had been made to Crime Stoppers, the most calls they had ever received for a job in Queensland. In June, motorcyclists and cyclists held a Ride for Daniel fundraiser appeal. In August, more than 50,000 printing companies rallied to produce 1.7 million leaflets for information on Daniel's case. Mullany Dairies also distributed 25,000 milk bottles with Daniel's photos on them. On the 4th of October, which was also Daniel's brother Dean's 17th birthday, the state government announced a $250,000 reward as well as possible indemnity from prosecution for any information that would help solve Daniel's case. It was the biggest reward in Queensland's history, causing a flood of calls to Crime Stoppers, who had now received over 8,000 calls regarding the case. On the 22nd of November, police released comfits and sketches of the man allegedly seen at the bus stop with Daniel on the afternoon of his disappearance. They depicted a man between 25 and 40 years old with a gaunt face and dark brown wavy hair, as well as some facial hair. On the morning of the 7th of December 2004, the 1-year anniversary of Daniel's disappearance, more than 1,500 people attended a memorial service at St. Catherine's Church in Siena Catholic College. Bruce and Denise decided not to make a public statement, but instead shared their words in a 13-minute DVD. Denise said, quote, "There is never a day when I do not search for your face. Somewhere, everywhere, anywhere, I see a turn of the head, a back that reminds me of you, and I hurry to look more closely, only to feel despair again, because of course it's not you. Are you lying in some lonely place, dead or lost? My heart reaches out to you and I try to touch you there. I breathe warm breaths towards you and pray that you will know. I call to you in your lostness and long for you to hear my voice of love. Are you held captive by someone? We would give anything to see you, just to see you once more. I imagine that you were somewhere close, and that torments me, as I believe I should be able to see you. I imagine that you're far away, and my soul weeps over the distance between us. There is no place where my love will not reach you. There is not a time when I will forget you. As I go on, I carry you close to me, my love, as part of the ongoing of my life. Later that day, a memorial was unveiled for Daniel under the Keel Mountain overpass where he disappeared. A plaque had been placed there alongside a poinciana tree. Poincianas bloomed red in December, the month of Daniel's disappearance. In May of 2005, Denise and Bruce officially established the Daniel Morcombe Foundation, which has done and continues to do incredible work across Australia. The foundation aims to provide personal child safety education to children, support educators, parents, and carers through the provision of resources and education, and directly supports young victims of crime. It also aims to make sure that Daniel is never forgotten. In December of 2007, the Morcombe family sold their Palmwoods home and moved to a smaller property nearby. Daniel's bedroom had remained completely untouched all these years, but the family found the courage to pack up all of his belongings and place them in a storage shed. By December of 2008, despite an extensive investigation with over 18,000 jobs logged by Crime Stoppers, over 100 police officers conducting over 10,000 interviews, there had been no breakthroughs in the case. Bruce Morcombe had even started his own investigation, conducting interviews with sex offenders that said they had information, but nothing came of any of this. In December of 2008, a private donation lifted the reward for information on Daniel's disappearance to $1 million, but by the end of May 2009, this reward expired unclaimed, and the reward was once again reduced to the state government's $250,000. Months later, in July of 2009, Bruce and Denise called for a coronial inquest into their son's disappearance, hoping the long list of persons of interest would be looked into once again. The inquest was granted and began in October of 2010, in which a 10,000-page police brief revealed 35 high-level persons of interest. The names were suppressed in the media, and they were simply referred to as P1 through 35. Each person of interest gave evidence at the inquest. Denise and Bruce attended every single day of this inquest and had to listen to theories as to what happened to their son, as well as horrific details of each person of interest's history of child sex abuse. The last person of interest to give evidence at this inquest was P7, whose real name was Brett Peter Cowan, a 41-year-old father of 3. He was known to police as he was a convicted child sex offender and had been questioned multiple times over the years in relation to Daniel's disappearance. He'd never been ruled out as a suspect, as there were many inconsistencies in his story and holes in his alibi. He matched the description of the man seen waiting at the bus stop with Daniel, and he owned a white 1990 four-wheel drive Nissan Pajero, a vehicle which matched the description of one seen in the area by 2 separate witnesses. So let me tell you a little bit about this man, because his past and his criminal history is a big part of why he was a person of interest in this case. Brett Cowan was born on the 18th of September 1969 in Bunbury, Western Australia. He was the third of Marlene and Peter Cowan's 4 sons and grew up in a strict military household. His dad was an Australian Army major and suffered from PTSD after serving in the Vietnam War. In the early 1970s, the family relocated to Brisbane, where Brett and his 3 brothers attended Marcellin College, now known as Mount Maria College, where Cowan's English teacher described him as a bully who was despised by his peers. He dropped out of school in grade 10 and was considered to be the black sheep of the family, even stealing from his own mother, and his history of sexual abuse started at just 9 years old when he began sexually abusing a 6-year-old over a 9-year period. By age 11, he began smoking marijuana, and by age 18, he claimed to have molested up to 30 young boys and girls aged between 6 and 8 at his local swimming pool. By this time, he was also a regular user of LSD, cocaine, and methamphetamines. His first criminal conviction came at age 18 in 1987. He'd been charged with minor property offences and as a result had to perform court-ordered community service, performing maintenance at a public park in Brisbane. Children from a nearby childcare centre were playing in the park when Cowan took one of the boys, just 7 years old, into a toilet block, locked them both in one of the cubicles, and repeatedly molested him until one of the childcare workers started calling out his name looking for him. When the young boy told Cowan he was going to tell his mum about what had happened, he reached out and squeezed the young boy, threatening to kill him if he ever told anybody. Cowan was quickly arrested for the attack, but was released on bail, which allowed him to flee for the next 2 years. He was caught in New South Wales in 1989, flown back to Brisbane for trial, where he was sentenced to a measly 2 years in prison, of which he only served 14 months.
I was a bright student, then after that, my schooling, my attitude, my happiness didn't have it no more.
He took a lot away from you, didn't he?
He took everything. He took my life.
4 years later, in 1993, Cowan was living at a caravan park in Darwin with his girlfriend. His 6-year-old neighbor came to him looking for his sister, and instead of taking the young boy to his sister, he took him through a gap in the park's fence into a field of wrecked cars. He violently molested the boy on the body of one of the wrecked cars, and when the boy began to cry, he squeezed his neck until he fell unconscious and left him for dead. Miraculously, later that night, the boy stumbled into a nearby service station looking for help. He was naked, covered in blood and cuts. He had a punctured lung, a broken collarbone, and both of his eyes were hemorrhaging because of the strangulation. His injuries were so severe that he later had to be operated on, and one of the policemen that found him thought that he had been hit by a car. The boy was too traumatized to name Cowan as his attacker, and as they began investigating at the caravan park, Cowan denied having any involvement and even told police that he hoped they caught the bastard. He only confessed once the police started collecting DNA samples from around the caravan park, as they'd found semen in the boy's discarded underwear. He was examined by a psychologist for his trial, who claimed Cowan, quote, thought the boy had probably enjoyed what happened and therefore would not want to report him. In 1994, he was sentenced to just 7 years in jail for the attack. During his time in jail, he was transferred from the Northern Territory to Queensland to complete a sexual offenders treatment program, which enabled his release after serving just 3.5 years. After his release, he spent the next 2.5 years living with his aunt and uncle on the Sunshine Coast, both of whom were pastors. He began attending church and claimed to be a reformed Christian, though the church was not made aware of his past crimes against children. He was accused of raping a 15-month-old child, 12-year-old boy, and 15-year-old girl during this time, but was never charged in relation to any of these attacks. In September of 1999, he married a woman named Tracy, who he met at church. He told her the basics of his offending, but she believed as a Christian that he'd changed. Together they moved to Biawak in 1999, where Cowan would remain until 2004. They had 2 children together, but divorced within 5 years, and Tracy was awarded custody of their children. After his divorce at age 37, he began dating an 18-year-old girl. She revealed that he would sometimes strangle her to the point of unconsciousness and even made her role play a kidnapping. She said, quote, we stopped at a service station. He told me to get out and pretend that I didn't know him and ask for a lift. He then proceeded to drive away, came back, I got in the car, and on the ride home he said, you should be more careful who you trust picking you up, and locked the doors. He then proceeded to take me back to the caravan park and pulled me by my hair into the caravan and proceeded with disgusting sexual acts upon me. She also revealed that his email address at the time was 6ULDV8, which is a neuronym for sexual deviant. So Cowan was first questioned in relation to the disappearance of Daniel Morcombe on the 21st of December 2003, just 2 weeks after the disappearance. He told police that he'd left his home in Biawak at 1:30 p.m. that day to pick up a mulcher from a friend's house in Nambour, arriving back home at around 2:30 p.m. He claimed he didn't leave the house for the rest of the night. The route from Biawak to Nambour passes the bus stop under the Keel Mountain overpass where Daniel was waiting, and we know that he was waiting there from about 1:30 to 2:15 p.m. Cowan agrees that he did drive past this bus stop at around this time frame, but unlike several other witnesses who claim they saw Daniel, an unknown man, a 4-wheel drive, and a blue sedan, he claims that he didn't see any cars or any people under the overpass. He provided police with a DNA sample and allowed them to take his car for forensic examination, neither of which turned up any evidence relating to the case. The next day, they questioned his wife at the time, Tracy, who said that he didn't arrive home until at least 3 p.m. They also questioned his friend that he picked the mulcher up from in Nambour that day, who said that he couldn't have stayed at his house for longer than 5 minutes to pick up this mulcher. When police reenacted Cowan's drive from Biawak to Nambour and Nambour back to Biawak, they found that there was 45 minutes in his story that was unaccounted for. Despite this discrepancy, his second interview wasn't until the 5th of July 2006 in New South Wales, where he had since moved. During this interview, he admitted that on his drive from Biawak to Nambour, he had seen the broken down bus, and also agreed that he did share resemblance with the composite sketch of the unknown man seen at the bus stop with Daniel, but that it actually looked more like his brother. When questioned about his past criminal history involving young boys, he said, quote, I've always loved kids ever since I was small, but I just took it that little bit too far. To end the interview, police asked Cowan one last question. Would you tell us if you did it? To which he responded, probably not. On the 13th of August, police searched his former home in Biawak, where he'd been living at the time of Daniel's disappearance. SES workers searched the marshlands behind his home, but nothing came of these searches. On the 14th of September, he was questioned again. He was asked to attend the Queensland Police headquarters in Brisbane, where he showed up with his father. During this interview, he was asked about the 45 minutes unaccounted for in his alibi, and he explained that the reason for this discrepancy was because he hadn't wanted to admit that he was at his drug dealer, Sandy Drummond's house in Biawak. He spoke to her husband, who inspected the mulcher he he'd picked up earlier that day. They had coffee, he picked up his marijuana, and he left and went home. He claimed that he visited her regularly to purchase marijuana and that each time he would stay for roughly 30 minutes. When police interviewed Sandy Drummond the next day, she confirmed that Cowan would visit her regularly, but she couldn't confirm whether or not he was at her house on the day of Daniel's disappearance 2 years earlier. At the coronial inquest in 2011, Sandy's partner Kevin said that he had no recollection of Cowan ever attending their property with a mulcher in the back of his white Pajero. He also said that he and Sandy were members of the Biawar RSL club and that they would go there every Sunday afternoon to play the pokies and for the raffles that were drawn at 2 p.m. Sandy Drummond also testified to this fact at the inquest. Because they were members of the Biawar RSL club, they would play the pokies with electronic loyalty cards. So these cards would be inserted into the pokies machines and they would be able to collect points, and it would also keep track of every time they played the machines. These cards showed that Sandy and Kevin were playing the pokies at the Biawar RSL club at 2:20 p.m. on the 7th of December 2003, which directly coincided with the time that Cowan claimed that he was at their house. At the inquest, Cowan testified that he thought it was, quote, funny that they still thought I had something to do with Daniel's disappearance over 30 minutes or 35 minutes, whatever it was. Just having to do something in half an hour and get rid of, or, anything like that. I don't think that's possible. However, he did agree that in the absence of his visit to Sandy Drummond's house being accepted, suspicions would still remain that he was involved in Daniel's disappearance. Despite this major hole in his alibi at the inquest, he was still free to go home afterwards. On the 1st of April 2011, after 2 days of testimony at the coronial inquest, he boarded a flight back to Perth, Western Australia, where he had since moved and had a third child. On this flight, he sat next to a man named Joe Emery, who introduced himself to Cowan. He was a career criminal, so they had a lot in common, and they got to chatting and ended up talking for the entire 5-hour flight home. Emery told him that he was moving to Perth for the first time and needed to buy a car, and Cowan agreed to help him, and they exchanged phone numbers at the end of the flight. The next day, Cowan actually helped him go and purchase a car, and a few days after that, they went on a sightseeing tour of the Fremantle foreshore, and they ended up becoming quite good friends. On the 10th of April, Cowan was watching the news when coverage of the coronial inquest into Daniel's case aired. It was through this news coverage that he actually discovered the new evidence, placing Sandy Drummond and her partner Kevin at the Biawar RSL at the time that he claimed that he was at their house. Knowing that his alibi was disintegrating, he actually filed an application to change his name to Shadow Nunya Hunter. I will give you a moment to digest that name. By early May, Cowan, or Shadow Nunya Hunter, had lost his job and was on the verge of being kicked out of the caravan park he was living in because he couldn't afford it. So his good friend Emery introduced him to his friend Paul Fitzsimmons, who went by Fitzy, who could help him get some easy work and easy money. As it turned out, Emery was part of a crime gang, and Fitzy was the leader of the local branch. Over the next few months, Cowan, or Shadow, helped the gang with over 20 escalating criminal acts, including collecting money from brothels, blackmailing a bank manager, bribing customs officers at Perth International Airport, stealing $50,000 worth of cigarettes, buying ecstasy, buying illegal firearms and fake passports, stealing cars, and transporting illegal crayfish to restaurants. In June, he flew to Melbourne with Fitzy to steal $40,000 worth of blood diamonds, and it was during this trip that he met a man named Arnold. Now, Arnold was the big boss of the entire crime syndicate, so meeting him meant he was really moving up in the ranks. They worked on a basis of loyalty, honesty, and respect. These were things that were very important within the gang's hierarchy. So obviously he was proving himself, he was moving up, and now he was meeting the big guns. When he and Fitzy met with Arnold in the bar of the Hilton Hotel, Arnold turned up with his entourage, security guards, he had wads of cash, and he told Cowan about a big job that was coming up that he stood to earn $100,000 from if he continued going the way that he was. At this point, everything's coming up Cowan, from losing his job and almost losing his home to now making all of this money, and not only money, but friends too. He told Arnold, quote, "I found my calling. I found the job I've been waiting for all these years. I'm happy, and I haven't been happy like this before. It's not just the money, it's what I'm getting from yous, the mateship." In early August, Cowan was told that a corrupt cop who worked for the gang had discovered a new subpoena for him to give evidence at a new inquest into the disappearance of Daniel Morcombe. He assured Fitzy that he had nothing to do with the disappearance, that he was only a suspect because he lived in the area that Daniel went missing from at the time, but that his alibi was 100%, and either way, the subpoena wouldn't be able to reach him because he had since legally changed his name to Shadow Nunya Hunter. Fitzy told him, "If there's anything we need to know, just tell us. All you have to do is be honest, because it doesn't matter what you've done. Everyone in this gang has done bad things. We can fix those things. We can make things go away." By the 9th of August, it was time for the big job that Cowan had been told about by Arnold, where he was set to earn $100,000. Fitzy picked him up and drove him to the Hyatt Hotel, where they met with Arnold in the Swan River Room, the presidential suite of the hotel. Arnold told Cowan that he'd heard good things about him and the work that he'd been doing for the gang, but he had some concerns about his past, saying, "I don't care what you've done, I just need you to be honest with me so that we can fix it. We don't want it to cause problems for us." What Cowan didn't know is that Emery, Fitzy, and Arnold were all cops. They were part of a covert technique called Mr. Big, which is a very controversial policing technique where they would trick a suspect into joining a fictional criminal organization in order to get a confession out of them. 36 undercover police officers worked for months on this sting, and I'm going to play you a little bit now of the recording from Arnold's conversation with Cowan from the Hyatt Hotel.
Okay, what I've got is Arnold, Shadow Hunter, alias Brett Peter Cowan, the main suspect in the disappearance of Daniel Morcombe, who went missing in Queensland 7 December 2003. So what do I need to fix?
Yeah, okay. No, yeah, I do. I seen him standing there, I did a loop around, and instead of taking him to the shopping centre, I took him to a secluded spot that I knew of.
Well, where was that?
It's a beer on just off Cowan Creek.
So you're taking him to the house?
Yep.
What happened in the house? Like I said, I'm not judging you, right?
Yeah, well, I never got to molest him or anything like that. He panicked and I panicked and grabbed him around the throat, and before I knew it, he was dead.
8 years since Daniel's disappearance and months into the Mr. Big covert operation, Brett Cowan has finally admitted to the abduction and murder of 13-year-old Daniel Morcombe. To be honest, I'm actually surprised that he confessed during this conversation, because Arnold has to be the most cop-sounding cop I have ever heard in my life. He told Arnold that he'd seen Daniel waiting for the bus stop as he drove past and thought he was, quote, a cute little thing. He spoke of how he drove to the Christian Outreach Centre car park, which was just minutes from the bus stop. He parked behind a stand of trees there and walked to the bus stop where Daniel was waiting. After the first replacement bus passed them, he offered Daniel a lift to the Sunshine Plaza shopping centre, which he claims that Daniel accepted. He drove to an abandoned house on Kings Road in the Glasshouse Mountains, claiming to Daniel that he just needed to stop and tell his wife where he was going. At the property, he says he invited Daniel in for a glass of water, at which point Daniel freaked out and started trying to flee, so he never got the opportunity to sexually assault him. He offered no insight into his actions other than to say he was an opportunistic killer and had to kill Daniel to avoid detection because he knew if Daniel got away, he, quote, was fucked. He told Arnold that he then put Daniel's body into the back of his Pajero and drove him out to the bushland near an old sand mine. He removed his clothes before disposing of his body there and threw his clothes and his shoes off a bridge into Cowan Creek. He claims that he went back about a week later with a shovel to dispose of any evidence he may have left behind and used the shovel to crush up a fragment of Daniel's skull that he found there. The next day, on the 10th of August, Cowan flew out with Fitzy and another member of the gang named Ian to show them everywhere he had gone on the day of Daniel's abduction so that they could see if there was any remaining evidence and dispose of it. On the 13th of August, he drove them along the route that he had taken when he abducted Daniel, from his friend's house in Nambour where he picked up the mulcher, to the bus stop where he abducted Daniel, and then to the abandoned house on Kings Road. While he was at the house, he said, quote, "And that's where it happened. That's where I thought he was going to run, and my arm went around his neck and I choked him out." He claimed that he felt a bone in Daniel's neck break as he did so. He took them through the bushland with unsettling familiarity and walked them through the exact route that he carried Daniel's body before dumping him in a body of water. He also pointed out the location of the bridge over Cowan Creek where he disposed of Daniel's clothes and shoes. That afternoon, Brett Peter Cowan was finally arrested at the Kings Road site for the murder of 13-year-old Daniel Morcombe. After his arrest, police and hundreds of state emergency service volunteers searched the areas identified by Cowan for Daniel's body and shoes. It wasn't until 4 days into the search they made their first discovery, Daniel's shoe. Over the next 4 weeks, they found remnants of underwear, a belt, and a pair of shorts, as well as a total of 17 bone fragments, including sections of leg, arm, rib, and hip. DNA from Daniel's old toothbrush confirmed that the bone fragments were a match to 13-year-old Daniel Morcombe. On the 7th of December 2012, exactly 9 years after his disappearance, Daniel was finally laid to rest at a funeral at his old school, Siena Catholic College. Over 2,000 people attended the service, and an unopened Christmas gift from 2003, Daniel's report card, which arrived the day after his disappearance, and his school photo were placed on his casket. His casket was carried out of the church by his brothers and school friends, while family and the emergency service volunteers who helped search for him formed a guard of honor. He was buried a short distance from the Morcombe family home. Cowan's trial began on the 10th of February 2013. He was charged with murder, indecently dealing with a child under the age of 16, and improperly dealing with a corpse. He pled not guilty to all charges. 116 witnesses gave evidence at the trial, and all of Cowan's past criminal history, including his child abuse convictions, were inadmissible in court. His defense team tried to argue that his confession was false and that he'd been told by someone, potentially an undercover officer, where Daniel's remains were hidden. His defense also tried to paint reasonable doubt by suggesting that another person of interest, Douglas Jackway, was Daniel's real killer. He was an early suspect in the case and owned a blue sedan like the one seen by multiple witnesses at the bus stop and was aggressive when police seized it for testing. He looked like the sketches of the man seen at the bus stop with Daniel. His alibi for the time of the murder was unsubstantiated, and he had a history of abuse against children, which, unlike Cowan's criminal history, was actually allowed into evidence at the trial. The trial ended on the 13th of March 2013, and after 8 hours of deliberation, the jury found Brett Peter Cowan guilty of the murder of 13-year-old Daniel Morcombe. The next day, he was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 20 years. He was also sentenced to 3.5 years for indecently dealing with a child under the age of 16 and 2 years for interfering with a corpse, all of which were to be served concurrently. At sentencing, each member of the Morcombe family gave a powerful victim impact statement. Bruce said, quote, 10 years ago, you made a choice to rip our family apart. Your decision to pull over and abduct Daniel for your own evil pleasure ultimately caused a level of pain to each of us that has made it hard to go on. Over the 10 years, we made a face for the media with determined self-control on the outside. On many occasions, particularly in the first few months, I was physically ill each morning at the unbearable images of what may have happened to my son Daniel. Even today, I'm haunted by thoughts of how long he was actually held captive and what other unspeakable things you did in those sheds at the end of Kings Road at Beerwah. Why would you really dump someone without clothes? Why was his belt loose and not still looped through his pants? It makes me nauseous just thinking about your total lack of respect for a child's life. Listening to you describe and watching you with a smirk on your face how you threw Daniel's lifeless body down an embankment, and a week later you returned and crushed his skull with a shovel. Chop, chop, chop. You coldly explained in an emotionless, matter-of-fact way. We now have to live our days with the unimaginable images of wild dogs devouring our much-loved son's remains. Daniel did not deserve that. He was a great kid and would not hurt a fly. You have robbed him of 70 years of life. Our family's first sleepless night without Dan on December 7th, 2003 haunts me even today. That feeling of helplessness and unimaginable pain never leaves you. The next day, I recall picking up Dean after work in the afternoon on Monday, December 8th. He asked me, have they found Daniel? These are 4 small words that torture me even today because I had to answer no. I listened to Denise's broken sleep, punctuated by frequent nightmares, and looking into the face of my young twin boy who has lost his soulmate, a raw image that is often relived, which had a profound effect on how I functioned. Nothing about my life today resembles how we enjoyed life as a family before that day. Our friends from 2003 are different because we are no longer the same people. We can be short-tempered and have a streak of bitterness and carry on caused by your delirious selfish actions. We were forced to move away from our unique garden paradise and much-loved family home. We were running a successful small business that we were forced to sell. We could not return to regular employment because we were constantly distracted with disturbing thoughts. We were forced to sell all our other investments to be able to survive, but survive we did, because you made one monumental mistake that day. You picked on the wrong family. Our collective determination to find Daniel and expose a child killer was always going to win. Perhaps the greatest impact your heinous crime has had on me is being witness to the impact it has had on the people that I love. You have caused immeasurable mental stress and anxiety to not only me, but Daniel's mother Denise, Daniel's brother Dean, and Daniel's twin Bradley. I have also witnessed the impact your cold, calculating actions have caused to extended family members. Daniel's grandparents have had years of healthy living trimmed off their life. Daniel's uncles and aunts and cousins, plus mates at school have all been seriously impacted by what you did. I often wonder about the other victims who you have left in your wake. That too causes me moments of great sadness. Your own children are of course victims of your crimes, and I wonder about them. In a strange twist of fate, the Daniel Morcombe Foundation was established to educate children about personal safety and also assist young victims of crime. I've sat watching you in the same court for close to 40 days, covering the coronial inquest, the committal hearing, the pre-trial hearing, and your trial here. Throughout that time, you have been completely devoid of any remorse of what you did to Daniel. Your deliberate actions are now recorded for all to see. It is the most brazen crime that has shocked the nation. Sitting in the same room as you revolts me. How you sit there day after day, almost frozen in one position, is chilling. You have been convicted as a repeat sex offender, leaving a trail of destruction, distress, and damage to souls for 3 decades. Predators like you cannot be rehabilitated. A cunning plan by police has brought you unbalanced. You have been exposed as an opportunistic, perverted, cold-blooded, child-killing pedophile. Central to the facts, and not who done it, but you done it. May Daniel's soul rest in peace. Daniel's twin brother Bradley's statement read, "It is 10.5 years since you robbed me of my twin brother. You've had a detrimental impact on my life over this time, and I will never be the same for the rest of my life." In December 2003, Daniel and I had just finished grade 9. We were looking forward to enjoying 6-week school holidays together. We shared hobbies and interests and a bond that was special, a bond only twins can experience. 12 days after you abducted and murdered my brother, it was our joint 14th birthday. Teenage birthdays are supposed to be fun and something you look forward to. This was not a fun day. It was torture. Another week would pass and that was Christmas Day. Another painful day for me and all of the family. Daniel and I also had a trip to Melbourne booked in January to visit our grandparents. I ended up flying down alone. Time after time, day after day, special event after special event, none of them would be the same again. 10 years have now passed and milestone occasions are never celebrated like they should have been. My 18th and 21st birthdays have come and gone without a double celebration. That hurts me. I gained my driver's license and bought my first car without Daniel, moments that should have been shared. I will never forget the first night of his disappearance. I slept in bed with mum and dad and it was the worst night imaginable. We hardly slept at all and we were all very distraught. Returning to school was tough. I struggled with the attention. Everyone was very supportive and kind, but I could never be that boy in the background anymore. I completely lost my way academically. My grades suffered and I lacked concentration at school. This caused me not to return after grade 11. I could no longer handle the focus on me and the attention of being Daniel's brother at school, at home, or anywhere I went. I've become very withdrawn. I had ambitions of going on to university and becoming a pilot, but all of these dreams eventually fall apart. I'm not the person I could have been. I'm consistently angry and battle mood swings, but life goes on. Thanks to family support, I've held a steady job since I left school. I'm getting married in August of this year, I hope with my fiancé to purchase a home. But it never leaves you. Daniel cannot join me for a beer, nor be my best man at my wedding. Brett Cowan, your selfish actions have hurt me in ways that no one can imagine. In 2016, Brett Cowan was actually attacked in prison. An entire mop bucket full of boiling hot water was poured over his head by an inmate who then proceeded to punch him in the face. He had to be taken to hospital with burns to his head, chest, and legs, but unfortunately, he is okay. After the attack, he's also now been given approval to use the name Shadow Nunya Hunter in jail. Denise and Bruce Morcombe continue to spread awareness and educate children about personal safety. They speak at schools, community gatherings, and public events. Day for Daniel is still growing each year, and by October 2011, they had more than 1 million participating students, with school registrations recorded in all Australian states and territories. Their foundation, the Daniel Morcombe Foundation, also provides financial support for young victims of crime. It's honestly hard to describe the impact that this case had on the entire country of Australia and how ingrained this case is into our entire society in Australia as well. Since this case, there's actually a policy called the No Child Left Behind policy, which makes it illegal for bus drivers in Australia not to pick up underage people, whether or not they can pay for the bus fare. A bus driver was actually fired in February of 2022 for not picking up 3 underage boys. This case is responsible for a massive culture shift in Australia, and it really changed the culture of leaving kids at home and what age you can do that, and letting kids go to the shops by themselves, letting them ride their bikes in the streets together. It made people a lot more aware of the dangers that are out there. Even when I was in high school, when I was about 16 years old, I went to Kerry's house and I didn't tell my parents, which is not my finest moment, that's for sure. I thought I had told them because Kerry and I only lived a few streets away from each other and we had been dating for like a year by this point. So my parents were perfectly comfortable with me going to his house. They were comfortable with him coming over to our house. We hung out all the time. So they didn't mind. So I thought I had told them, but I didn't. I guess I didn't. So they got home. I wasn't there. They started freaking out after a while because I wasn't answering my phone. Kerry and I were watching a movie. So my phone was down. I wasn't checking it. I wasn't answering. I didn't even know that they were calling me. So they start calling all of my friends. They even went to one of my friends' house that I hung out with a lot and checked if I was at her house, which I wasn't. And it was a really scary situation for them. They ended up calling the police, and the police came to Kerry's parents' house, which was mortifying. I had no idea. I remember checking my phone and seeing all of these calls and texts from mum and dad, and I was just like mortified. I remember the police taking me home, and then I'm in the driveway with the police and with my parents, and the police give me this huge lecture. And I'm 16, I'm standing there with my arms crossed. I'm like super upset and super embarrassed about the whole thing. And I remember in this lecture, I remember this whole thing so vividly, but I remember in this lecture that they actually brought up Daniel Morcombe, and that was how they tried to drill into me that what I did by not telling my parents was a really, really bad thing, which it was as well. Like, you should never go anywhere without telling your parents. I don't even know what happened then because I'm so open and honest. I always have been open and honest with my parents about everything, where I'm going, who I'm hanging out with all the time. Like, I never snuck out. I never lied to my parents about anything like that. So that was a really, really bad moment for me, for sure. Anyway, that is everything from me today. I just want to thank our sponsor, MyHeritage, again, because if it wasn't for our sponsors, then I wouldn't be able to make these videos and I wouldn't be able to share these cases with you. They have a 14-day free trial for their complete plan, so I will leave a link in the description box if you want to check that out. And I'm also going to be donating the proceeds, the AdSense proceeds of this video, to the Daniel Morcombe Foundation. I'll leave a link to the Daniel Morcombe Foundation in the description down below as well if you want to check that out, if you want to make your own donation. But yeah, that's everything from me today. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your week. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And hopefully I will see you here next Monday. I'll see you in my next video. Bye guys.